The Democrats are in the middle of a civil war. We're going to go into it. This is The Ordinary American. I'm your host, Paul Sarkis. Thank you for joining us. And thank you for the great response to Friday's episode. Democrats are obviously lying. Somebody asked me, well, what are they lying about? I said, everything. Watch the episode. But the most important thing we said on that episode, the single most important thing, Forgiveness Friday. God loves you. In my worst times, I have to remember, God loves me. He wants the best for me. He didn't make me imperfect. He made me in his image. And while I am a sinner, I am forgivable and he loves me. All right. With that being said, we're going to get into the Democrat civil war. Now, I'm trying to show a clip from the Daily Wire, but it's messing with my situation. So I'm going to play that early, even though I had originally had it later in the show. I have a giant tech staff of one. You're looking at him, who's not very qualified. So I'm just going to play it and then we're going to get out of it. The quick setup is the Democrat civil war is between the establishment and the DSA, or the leftists, the El Sayeds, the Mandamis of the world. Okay? And you might even put a third category farther outside of the establishment and put the Fettermans of the world in there. We'll play Hakeem Jeffries saying he's no longer down with single-payer health care. The problem really is this. The establishment doesn't believe that the leftists can win general elections. Couple that with the establishment itself is now having a hard time winning primary elections. So now what you have is you have the establishment, the people who are already in power, who are sitting in Washington, who have been making the decisions for years, who Jesse Waters shows us that the DNC itself says have been getting generationally wealthy. They're now seeing, wait a second, if the leftists win our primaries and they can't win the generals, we will lose power. And we're getting generationally wealthy, and we don't want to lose that. All right, that's the setup. Now, the great Matt Walsh does these, essentially these documentaries. And I don't know the frequency. I think it's every month. And one of the things he tackled, I think it was last month. I think I don't remember if it's behind the paywall or not, but is communism. And I thought I knew a bunch, but I was wrong about one major fact. I had been saying for a long time that it took the Bolsheviks a decade before they gained real power. It was 2 decades. So we want to keep that in mind, because just because we might have defeated the left, the Democrats, in 2024, they're still at it. They started maybe, say, in 2016. It's only been a decade. They got another decade to go just to meet the Bolsheviks' track record. So I want to play 2 clips from this. One's at the beginning and one's at the end.
Imagine a country where a small group of resentful, unpopular left-wing radicals seize power and then use their power to deliberately destroy the family. Crush the church. Unleash criminals on the streets. Legalize abortion. Implement no-fault divorce. Enact insane economic policies. Institute affirmative action. Persecute their political enemies. And sow chaos to expand their control. Sounds familiar, but I'm not describing America. I'm describing Russia in 1917. You've probably never been to Russia, and you probably weren't alive during the Bolshevik revolutions, gulags, famine, Russian Revolution, Dostoevsky, or Tolstoy. The country idea that history is a would own nothing. And
listen to this now.
Marx's ideological pronouncements were radically at odds with how he actually lived, a pattern you'll recognize from leftists today. For example, Marx actually hated industrial workers. According to Sean McMeekin's book, To Overthrow the World, when Marx visited factory workers in the summer of 1845, he was not impressed with the workers' intellectual acumen. And when a tailor explained to Marx that they were organizing workers into collectives to negotiate better conditions with their employers, an angry Marx was seen pounding on the table with his fist before shouting that ignorance has never yet helped anyone. Marx sustained his lifestyle.
Now, what does that sound like to you? How about the deplorables? How about every time I say to anybody who we're talking to, Black Americans, Jewish Americans, young Americans. The left hates you. The Democrats hate you. You are a tool for them to extract wealth. We're going to show that here in a second. So that was important to show what it looks like in Russia compared to here, almost the same, and show that Marx doesn't care about the working class. It's not about the working class is the trick. He convinces the working class to get on his side because they're tricked into believing that he will help them or that Marxism will help them. So all of you people who've been voting Democrat for decades, maybe you grew up and your dad voted Democrat or your grandfather voted Democrat and you've been continuing to voting Democrat. You've been tricked just like they were, and you're continuing to be tricked. Now, here's the end part I want you to hear.
Found with a rock tied to his neck. Tikhon said in 1920 that, to the best of his knowledge, 322 bishops and priests have been executed since 1917. In the end, the Bolsheviks called for the extermination of entire groups: the Cossacks, the Circassians, and ethnic Germans. Upon Lenin's death, Stalin completed the job against the kulaks. When they weren't committing mass executions, they were forcing people to move to Siberia at gunpoint. The eighth rule of a communist takeover: exterminate the opposition.
Single party rule.
The country we described in this video was a place where a small minority of radical leftists, whose ideas were born from idealistic academics, but rooted in deep resentment, successfully took over a country using nothing but sheer willpower and total brutality. They followed the same rubric as all the others have done since: provoke a crisis, take advantage of the crisis, seize power, then crush your opposition. Thanks to a hapless opposition consumed with conspiracy and infighting, they seized total power, which they used to prosecute and intimidate their political enemies. They forced people to believe absurd things, elevated freaks, and intentionally wrought chaos. They used intimidation tactics to terrify the majority, who never supported them, into submission. Their first policy priorities upon taking power included unleashing criminals on normal people, instituting lunatic economic reforms, intentionally wrecking families by instituting no-fault divorce rules, legalizing and subsidizing abortion, persecuting Christians, and instating a policy of affirmative action for minority groups. The fact that people were willing to endure their rule for 7 decades is a testament to what humans are willing to put up with. The country we're describing, of course, is the first years of the Soviet Union, but it's also the United States. The reality is that the forces that drive the totalitarian left don't change over time.
All right, I'll break it there. That's the point that we're going to focus on today with this civil war. That's the left, okay? It's been the same since 1890, whatever, when it sort of started. The Bolsheviks were just the more brutal, the people willing to do more physical harm to others. And it worked. It took 2 decades, but it worked. And as you saw in there, they did things like affirmative action for minority groups. Always oppressor and oppressed. Why? Because the people weren't going to rise up. They weren't unhappy. The intellectuals, they were unhappy. They wanted more power. They felt that they deserved to be in charge. So what did they do? Took 2 decades, and they did it. And they finally got the power. We see that over here. And we see it if we look back to see the Frankfurt School and how they wanted to come over to America, and then the long march through the institutions, starting in academia. The Civil War now is because the establishment Democrats have woken up. Finally, we played James Carville quite a lot. He's now saying, I'm not with them. Talked about the schism in the party. Okay, we're going to play just briefly here Hakeem Jeffries over the weekend, where he basically says for the first time that he's not for, that he's not for single payer health. He has been for single payer health quite a lot in his career, and he's not anymore. Listen to this.
Do you personally support Medicare for all?
No, as you indicated, I haven't co-sponsored the Medicare for All legislation that has been introduced over the last several years. I do think we need to figure out how to fix our broken health care system and then build something better. once we repair the damage that has been done. Now, that will include doing things like extending the Affordable Care Act tax credits so that more than 20 million people who have seen their health insurance premiums skyrocket, in some cases by up to $1,000 a month.
As the great Thomas Sowell, hold on, let me go back to that. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries rejected Medicare for all and distanced himself from the Democrat Socialists of America. That's true. But what it doesn't say in there, and what you can do your own research on, is you can go back and see where Hakeem Jeffries was all for Medicaid for all before the crazy lefties came in. He sponsored bills, I think, in 2019 and maybe in 2020 or 2021. I can't remember. But you can research it. You can find it. That's the schism. He's in power right now. He has it. He loves it. He does not want to give it up. Now, I did this twice last week, but I am going to do it again in a much shorter version because it's important. He's in power right now. Okay? Pelosi, I know she's out, but was in power for decades. All of the Democrat and the establishment, the way, quick brief history. I spent my life at state level politics. Here's how it works. You may be a radical new candidate in either party, say the Democrat Party, and let's say you're a crazy lefty. But the establishment in the House that you're going to go get yourself elected to is old school establishment. Well, when you get elected, let's say you get elected, AOC, you don't see her as the giant head of a committee or included in leadership yet. Why? Because leadership takes time. It's by seniority. They prove their loyalty over a long period of time. So when she goes in, she's like a freshman in high school. She has no status. So even though she had a lot of status in the outside world and you see her, she gets a lot of press. She might run for president and everything else, but she's not the head of Ways and Means. By the way, I know that the Democrats aren't in control, but she wasn't the head of Ways and Means. Okay? You don't see these crazy lefties in charge of the big committees and doing these things. Why? Because it takes time. It's just like with the Republicans. I think it was in 12 or whenever it was, when a bunch of conservative Republicans, I think it was 2012, got elected in the House. And some establishment guys, who was it? Was it Cantor? One of them in Virginia, I think, was ousted. And there was a lot of people who said, oh, good, the conservatives are taking over. And I looked and I said, listen, what do I know? I just love my God, my country, my family, and my flag. But my experience working in state government is, it doesn't matter how big that win is in that one congressional district. When that person gets in, they're at the bottom of the list. And they better go along to get along. Otherwise, they don't get committee assignments. They get bad offices. They get smaller staffs. They get primaried. The word goes out to Republican money. Don't go with that person. There's a million things leadership can do. This is the point I make about Thune all the time. He's not passing the Save America Act on purpose. He has plenty of carrots and sticks to get it passed. He doesn't want to pass it. Same thing with the Democrats. This is the thing. Hakeem Jeffries is in power right now. He's the majority. He's the minority leader. Okay? So he wants to be speaker next. He doesn't want to lose. He needs the House to be taken over by the Democrats so he can stay in. And he doesn't believe the hardcore lefties are going to win the generals. He thinks they can win the primaries, but they won't win the generals. So what do? What did we say last week about the Wisconsin, about the Francesca Hong? It was corrupted because the establishment Democrats said we can't have her win. Okay? I bet you can't even name, I think the guy's name was Crowley. It was hard for me to come up with it, who she ran against. But you knew her because she was all over the news. Okay? This ties in, this fight is the fight between the left and the right. That communism documentary, by the way, Daily Wire, go watch it. He does unbelievable work. I think it's about an hour, so it's an easy listen. You can listen to it at speed if you want. He talks in a cadence that if you do 2x, so you can listen to it in 30 minutes, you'll catch most everything if you can concentrate. Okay? It's very, very much worth it. And what he does is he shows the parallels, as he was at the beginning and the end of that one, between Russia and us. And he shows that it took place over 2 decades. So think about it. Obama gets in. He puts in a bunch of things in government. Then Trump comes along and disrupts it. Obama then marshals the CIA, the FBI, foreign countries, everybody to get rid of Trump. They can't do it. They corrupt the elections. They get Biden in. They do a little bit more. Okay? Then Trump comes back and wins. Why? Because they don't have COVID and they can't do the mass mail-in ballots again. So Trump wins. They are trying their, and by the way, in that off season where Biden was, what did they try to do? They tried to jail Trump. They tried to kill Trump. They jailed his supporters. They went after the people, whether they be in government or outside of government, who supported Trump. And I say all the time, voting for Democrats is like putting yourself into jail. It's breaking into jail. That's exactly what it is. And I speak specifically to young Americans, Jewish Americans, Black Americans. Black Americans, we're going to switch to education here for a second, so we'll talk to you, but this goes for young Americans too. You have been voting in Democrats for generations, and your schools are routinely the worst. It's not because of you, it's because of who you're voting for. They don't want you to be smart. And then they employ the compensate the loser. Go back to one of last week's episodes. Compensate the loser. They crush you with terrible schools. Why? All they want is the money from the teachers' unions. They don't want you to have smart kids, because if you have smart kids, you may not vote for them. If you're dependent on them, you might vote for them. They take the money, they funnel it through the teachers' unions. We've been over that. Back to Democrats, back to nonprofits. Well, what's happening now in the Civil War? What's happening now with the left and the right? Stuff is starting to come apart. Stuff is starting to come apart. Let's go to school for a second. Where is that? There it is. Just going to put up a headline. We're going to get to more detailed stuff here in a second. Here's the headline. Boom, boom, boom. All right. See the headline? New York 3rd through 5th graders fail basic reading test with more than half not proficient, says the data. Not going to read it because it's too, but you get the gist of it. Why am I bringing it up? Well, let's ask a couple of questions. What happens in 6th grade? Do all those kids get left behind? No, they're getting pushed forward. So what happens in 6th grade, and then 7th grade, and then 8th grade, and then 9th grade, and then 10th grade, and then they get 11th grade, and then 12th grade, and then college. Here's the left lying to you. Here is the Democrats lying to you. What they do is they destroy your schools, and then when you can't get your students into the same high-achieving academic schools that the elected class think are so important, they compensate the loser. You're the loser. The Democrats see you as a loser. How do they compensate you? Affirmative action. They say, we're going to make the schools take a certain number of Black kids. And what do they base it on? Oh, it's racism. Well, it's racism, all right. It's just not racism by the American public. It's racism by the Democrat Party, who controls the school districts from K through 12, who totally corrupted the schools and make them illiteracy factories. So by the time kids get to college, they can't read, write, or do math. Oh, you think that's too much? I've overstated the case? You think so? Let's take a look. Where is it? Here it is. Not that I care about this, but you'll notice the source here. The source is not Fox News. Let's go. This is the San Francisco Standard. Okay, I don't know that paper, but I'll bet it's not a conservative paper. Let's look at the title. I teach calculus at Berkeley. Some of my students can't do middle school math. Since the University of California abandoned the SAT and ACT, thousands of faculty say it's admitting students who aren't prepared for the coursework. Will UC listen? Forget about whether UC listen. Remember what we just talked about. If they can't read or write or do math in the 3rd to the 5th grade, what do you think happens by the time they get to college? They've been promoted all along. They still don't know how to do the work. And then they get to college, and then what happens? Well, eventually this stuff comes apart. Eventually the rubber meets the road. We're going to read a little bit of this article. Eventually you get to college and you go into a Berkeley. Why Berkeley? Berkeley is a high academic achieving school. It's one of the sort of elite schools that the left, the elected class, the experts all think are super, super important to go to. So what do? They compensate the loser. You, Black Americans. That's who they think are the losers. Your kids now can't do the work. You can't get into Berkeley on your own when they had standardized tests. The standardized tests are racist. Everybody's racist. We're just going to give you spots. Then what happens? Read the great Heather McDonald, Mismatched. Thomas Sowell talks about it too, okay, and many others. Do the black students drop out, do worse, etc.? Why? They don't have the skills because, as we just showed, from 3rd to 5th grade, they can't read or write or do math at grade level. They don't catch up. They never catch up. They compensate the loser by affirmative action and saying, you deserve to get that spot. How about we just fix the school system? How about we teach the kids from K through 12 how to read, write, and do math at grade level? That's a novel idea. Why doesn't the left want that? Because they can't control you. Let's read this. In March, 2 California families opened college admissions decisions that should make anyone who cares about higher education stop and think. One student, I'll call him Elias, was admitted to a top university in California engineering program. His family was thrilled, though surprised. Math had been his weakest subject in high school, but they assumed the university had seen something they hadn't. They lied to him. Another student, Nadia, watched rejection after rejection arrive from UC campuses. One turned her down even though she had earned A's there in Calculus 2 and other college STEM courses through concurrent enrollment. So she was doing college work. These are real students. I've changed their names and withheld their schools to protect their privacy. Seen side by side, their outcomes don't make sense. They make perfect sense only if you imagine admissions working less like careful evaluation and more like chance. I don't use that comparison lightly. I teach mathematics. This is her now. I teach mathematics at UC Berkeley. 3 days a week, I stand in front of lecture halls with 500 to 1,400 students. By the second week of the semester, I already know who is in trouble. Some students are 5 to 8 years behind in mathematics. That's unbelievable. But I will tell you, that's racism. Because what she doesn't say in here, she sort of hints to it later, is that these are probably, a lot of these kids are minority kids. And they're coming from the worst schools, all controlled by Democrats, all controlled by the teachers' unions. And these people are only speaking up now, not because they're conservative, not because they care, because they can't do their job. She's got half her students can't do anything. How does she's not going to be able to meet whatever number she needs to meet. Now listen where they go with this. This is why this spring and summer, thousands of faculty members across 10 UC campuses, including more than 2/3 of UC's mathematics faculty, signed open letters urging the system to restore the SAT and ACT in admissions. 5 Nobel laureates, blah, 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 who cares? We did so because what an admissions letter is supposed to mean, that a student is ready to attend the school, no longer matches what we see in the classroom. This isn't a new debate. Now we're gonna get into some more and some historical things, but let's talk a little bit. Let's take that off for a second, okay? The 3rd through the 5th grader can't do the work. We showed you the clip last week of the Teacher of the Year candidate, or not candidate, the winner of Teacher of the Year from Nashville, who essentially was fired, I believe the story goes, because she wouldn't pass on to the higher grade the students who were incapable of doing the work. And parents got pissed, and the administrator said, she's got to go. Why? She wouldn't conform to the nonsense. Again, remember the episode, 2 or 3 episodes last week, where we mentioned the Christopher Browning book, Ordinary People. How do ordinary men in Poland turned into vicious killers because of conformity, because of peer pressure, because of not wanting to let their friends down, because of desensitization. That's a hard word to say. Desensitization, okay? So now those teachers are passing kids through who can't read, who can't write, who can't do math. And now the UC Berkeley professor is writing an article saying, yeah, we can't do our job because the kids who can do that work are stuck in the same classroom as the kids who can't. They're getting hurt, which, by the way, means we're getting hurt. How so? Because those kids go on to become engineers who work for airlines or airplane manufacturers or SpaceX or other places. We need them to know things. They're engineering products. If they can't learn in college, how are they supposed to learn things? And then what happens when they get out in the real world? If you wanted to cripple a certain segment of society, how would you do it? You would take away the education and make them compete in a world where you need to read, write, and be able to do math at grade level. There's a little bit more of this article that I want to get to, because one of the things they told you along the way, and by the way, I don't know this woman, but we'll guess. This woman, over the course of her career, I bet you voted Democrat. I bet you championed affirmative action. I'll bet you championed the fact that because blacks, say, weren't represented in the appropriate number from their point of view, at Berkeley, it was racist. The ACTs and SATs were racist. Now what's she doing? She's waking up and she's saying, wait a minute, we actually need that, because that's at least some frame of reference for whether these kids can do the work. Let's see if I can get to the right spot here. So during COVID, again, go back to what Matt Walsh said, they used a crisis to forward their cause. The fake COVID pandemic crisis. What did they do? Schools can't use tests. Everybody jumped in. They thought it was the greatest thing ever. It takes a bunch of time till things funnel through and you start to get the kids who were in high school in COVID, so they didn't learn how to read, write, or do math, then get passed forward, then get into college because there's no tests. And now what's happening? They're coming apart. Many peer universities have since reconsidered. In other words, they've brought back the test. MIT, Stanford, Harvard, and Yale all suspended testing requirements during the pandemic. All have reinstated them across the Ivy League. Similar reversals are underway. By the way, you don't see Stanford, Harvard, and Yale making giant announcements about that, do you? I didn't. Faculty asked the university, UC, they're talking about, faculty asked the university to revisit the policy. Now, this article is basically saying that they won't do it. Now, where is it? Before 2020, Berkeley administered a diagnostic exam to incoming Calculus 1 students. Between 2018 and 2020, 71% of roughly 2,200 students tested as ready or nearly ready for calculus. Freeze frame. This is before the pandemic. Only 71%? Wait, what? Ready for calculus? In college? That alone is troubling. She's not even troubled by that. Excuse me. She's troubled by other things that are very troubling, but she's not attacking that. Why? Because she was voting for these things and supporting these candidates back then. It was happening slower back then, 71%. I'll bet you if you look at the data from 2008 and then 2000 or 1998, it was bigger percentages back there. That's almost certainly been going down, okay? Now, if she gets here next, you can see the lowest number. At the bottom of the distribution, there are almost nobody, just 0.14% tested below basic algebra. Basic algebra for people who are going to Berkeley. I'm going to make up the name of a college I don't think exists, okay? Florida A&T State Industrial School. Never heard of it. I don't think it exists. I just created that on the fly, okay? I will bet that even students of that fictional college 20 years ago could do basic algebra. She's saying that very small percentage, but there's still some. Now, let's go down here. After UC adopted test blind admissions, the picture changed dramatically. Among approximately 2,800 Calculus 1 students tested between 21 and 23, so not even that far in, a different diagnostic that measured proficiency in 8 mathematical topics, the share who were ready or nearly ready for calculus, meaning they had proficiency in up to 5 to 8 subjects, fell to 51%, dropping to 44% by 2023. She doesn't give us the numbers now. Now, maybe she doesn't have them, or maybe it's because it's way worse. Most troubling, ready for this one? The bottom of the distribution exploded. So the bottom of the distribution is that 0.14% that tested below basic algebra at Berkeley. Where is it? Most troubling, the bottom of the distribution exploded. 17% of students answered none of the 8 diagnostic topics correctly. By 2023, more than 1/3 had severe math deficits, and the single most common score on the exam was 0. I'm not Copernicus, but I'm pretty sure 0 is not good. Okay? Not on that test. The Democrats have been lying. They are in the middle of a civil war. They have been voted, the establishment, by the way, they aren't good guys. They've been voting for all this leftist affirmative action, crippling your schools, taking your money, all of it, all along the way. Now they're worried because they're seeing the data that I showed maybe a month ago, which showed that by and large, America does not want leftism. Democrat primary voters might. This is why the show is geared towards trying to talk to people who vote Democrat. You have got to wake up. You have been tricked. One of the things in that article that I'm not going to go through now is they quote this scientist named Jennifer Doudna. I think that's how you pronounce her name. She won the Nobel Prize for the gene editing, the CRISPR gene editing breakthrough. Obviously very, very smart. She's originally from Hawaii, if I recall her biography right. She's at Berkeley, I believe. And what does she say? She says what all of the lefty Democrats say. Well, the intention was good. The intention of no tests was good. What on earth was the intention? I'm serious. What does she think the intention was? If the intention was there's so much systemic racism that we got to let those kids into the school, is that the intention that she's referring to? Because that's categorically not true. And what is true is that she was voting for the Democrats. Or let me rephrase that. If she was voting for the Democrats, she was voting for the ones with the racist policies. I only have to look at the state of schools. I showed you that New York Post article. 3rd to 5th graders can't read more than half. Controlled all by Democrats. Controlled all by Democrats. And in black cities, black Democrats. That's racism. You don't have to let your schools suck. There's a great article. I'll try to post it on my X, The Ord American. It's by the obvious great Thomas Sowell. It's an article about Dunbar High School. If you're like me and you grew up in the 80s, you remember Dunbar being a great basketball high school. But 20, 30, 40, 50 years beforehand, it was actually a great academic institution which produced the first black fill in the blank for dozens of things. I think first black senators and congressmen. It was just huge. It was a great school. He does an article where he writes about the greatness of that school and shows how when the Democrats got a hold of everything and started to help in the 60s, how it went to poop. Okay? So Jennifer Doudna and all these professors at Berkeley who are now worried and say, oh, we got to change this. You're right, you do have to change it. But what you really have to do is you have to stop supporting Democrats who have crushed your schools. You have to stop supporting Democrats. Everything is a lie. And there is a civil war. Now we're seeing it with the establishment and the leftists. Oh, heavy P here. Okay, I'm going to try to be a little light here if I can find it. I want to put up one thing I think that's funny. Okay, the great historians, Clay and Buck, if you know them, they did this piece. I just want you to see this. And then I want to say something about it. Hold on. Where is it? There it is.
Do think of all the vehicles out there. I'm not sure you could point to a vehicle and say that someone who is gay, a woman, is likely to drive it. I don't even know what number 2 would be behind a Subaru.
Can I share this with you?
Yeah, I want to know.
This is what Grok says about the Subaru connotation. It came from deliberate 1990s marketing by Subaru of America, not organic preference. In the early to mid 1990s, Subaru's U.S. sales were struggling against larger Japanese brands. So they looked at groups that would pay a premium for the all-wheel drive, and a consistent standout group was lesbians.
And now some poor guy is driving around in his Subaru that he just got for a great deal. And he's like, guys, it has great gas mileage.
I hope she's not listening. I think my sister-in-law drives a Subaru. Oh, we're going to get heat. We're going to get heat.
Yeah, I'm sure they did. Okay, the reason why I'm bringing that up is, A, it's just funny, but B, it's funny to me because my daughter, who's a teenager, her and her friends have often said the Subaru is a lesbian car. And I used to think, oh, well, I guess that's just sort of, it's just sort of gravitated to that. No, it was on purpose. It shows how gullible or how marketable we humans are. All right. I mean, there's actually a larger point in there, but I just think that that's funny. Clay and Buck crack me up. All right. I'm going to go back. I'm going to do something that I'm sure is against the rules of common, everyday, intelligent podcasting or show stuff. I'm going to play Jesse Waters again. I've got the shorter version. I just want to play this one little clip.
Wiped clean. They pulled a crooked. Deleted for security purposes. The autopsy's author says he knows why they nuked the chapter. That chapter was basically the cause of death. Why the Democrats lost. And this is what they were trying to hide. Quote,
watch this.
There are too many people who have become generationally wealthy off politics and drive too much of the decision-making within the ecosystem. The people in the room at the highest levels of 24 decision-making misunderstood the mood and practicalities facing everyday America. The secret chapter also says the Democrat politicians got so rich that they lost touch too.
The elected, I say this all the time, the elected class live different lives than the rest of us. They're using nonprofits and others to get massively wealthy, as that report, that's, by the way, the DNC report. But no wonder they don't want that out, by the way. No wonder. And who are the people that they're referring to? The people who are covering it up are the decision makers who they say are getting generationally wealthy. They don't want anybody to know that. They'll lose power. Some of them haven't got their generational wealth yet. You got to remember something about a corrupt organization like that. Think about organized crime, TV shows you've seen. In any of these corrupt organizations, the value is always at the top. The value is always at the top. So it's move up or move out. So when it's corrupted, and you see this all the time in politics, somebody goes from being like lieutenant governor to then AG. Okay, now that lets somebody else get in that lieutenant governor spot. And then whoever went from AG, they might have gone to governor. I'm thinking about California. Then people need to move up. They don't stay too long. Why? Because the big benefits are at the top. That's how leftism works. That's how corruption works. So Hakeem Jeffries hasn't been able to become speaker yet. Pelosi was speaker. They lost the control of the House. Hakeem becomes minority leader. He wants a shot at the title. He doesn't want the left to take over the party and lose general elections. So they lose. He's not happy being the minority leader. We've played before the stories of him. He passed special laws so that he could keep his I think it's his mortgage interest at like $200 a month or something, or some scam with his, maybe it's a rental or something. Okay, there's always a scam. Why do I bring that up? First of all, go back to the Matt Walsh thing, corruption through and through. Now, let's go, where is it? Yes, here it is. This was a story, didn't get a lot of play because it's now, unfortunately, these stories are so common. Hold on, where is it? Yeah, hold on. Get it up there. Read this. Radical judge just ordered the Trump administration to keep dumping $241 million into the corrupt LA homelessness machine known as LASA. HUD already cut them off for fraud and total mismanagement. Now Judge David O. Carter is forcing the money back into the same failing system. This is pure protection of the homeless industrial complex. Impeach him now. This is true. Who is this? Gunther Eagleman. I listen to him sometimes. I watch him. Big following. Okay, I recommend him. I'm bringing this up because we just talked about the DNC itself saying that the elected class is getting generationally wealthy. It's distancing them from the people. They don't know what's really going on. Ro Khanna is an example of this. Okay? They don't care. It's not a concern of theirs. LASA. This is one of these corrupt organizations. You saw the Trump administration's already tried to shut them down for fraud. I looked them up. I thought they were a nonprofit. It's actually worse than that. They're like a quasi-government, quasi-nonprofit. I forget what they call it. Okay? And what do? We talked about this in the education side of things. They distribute the money they get from taxpayers out to over 100 different nonprofits. And the people who sit on the board are appointed by, I think, the mayor's office and the county commissioners and some other, all political patronage. All, I'm sure, making big salaries. And at least from what I can see, they've been getting from the federal government around $800 to $900 million a year for quite a few years. That's our tax dollars being funneled into this homelessness thing. As homelessness has been getting worse, they've continued to get the money. And now a judge just says, nope, you have to keep sending it. Why? That judge, I will bet, I don't know, somebody do the research and send it to me. I will bet that judge has a friend, a neighbor, a cousin, a wife, a daughter, a son, something, who sits on one of the nonprofits that gets that money. That is what the DNC report was saying. It's so corrupted. The elected class is so corrupted, and they're getting generationally wealthy through that corruption that they can't be bothered with ordinary Americans. They don't know or understand. One of the things that Matt Walsh says, which is critical, and I think a good reason for you to go watch that full documentary on Russia and on communism, I couldn't spit it out, is he makes a critical point that I try to make on here often. We ordinary Americans, we try to look and say, let's argue policy. LA sucks. I used to live there. I had to leave. LA, homelessness. Billions go into their homelessness, whatever that is, LASA, and it gets worse. Obviously, it's not working. We all, regular people, ordinary Americans, we try to argue policy. We look at that and say, hey, it's not working. Maybe we should change it. We think we're arguing with somebody over policy. What Matt Walsh makes clear in that documentary is with the communists, with the leftists, they're not looking for it to work. They don't care. It's not about working. They have no concern at all. In fact, not working is better. Look at the schools, which we talked about earlier today. They don't want these things to work. They want to extract the wealth, get the money from us. They're getting generationally wealthy, and they're getting more power. Single party rule. Remember that 8th lesson of communism? Get rid of your opponent. Single party rule is get rid of your opponent. So all you young people who have been convinced that Donald Trump is a fascist, he hasn't got rid of his opponent. He didn't try to jail them. He should. They've done illegal things, but he hasn't yet. Who's done that? The Democrats have. Where is the single party rule Republican state? Florida's not single party rule. Tennessee's not single party rule. I live in Tennessee. There's plenty of Democrats. Plenty. Detroit, Baltimore, New York. Where those are all basically single party rule cities by Democrats. California, Illinois, Massachusetts, basically all single party states. Young people, you've been tricked. Wake up. The path out is Trump. You don't have to have TDS your whole life. Now, you can, if you haven't been already, you can never be T cubed. What's T cubed? Triple Trumper. Trump in 2016, Trump in 2020, Trump in 2024. That's a tongue twister. But you don't have to be. You can't vote for him in 2028 despite his awesome trolling of everybody. But you can start to vote for his policies. I want to transition now to a little Promethean action. Where is it? Where is it? There it is. This is Mike Stager, who is not Susan and is not Barbara, but we've played him a little bit. He has a great little piece. We're going to play a little bit of it, where he essentially lays out the issue. And this gets to young people in the American system. You are what you make. Donald Trump is bringing back manufacturing. By the way, this morning I read manufacturing is at a 4-year high, and it's only going to get higher. Only going to get higher. I talked last week about it. We created 30-something thousand new private sector jobs, but we got rid of 50,000 government jobs. I'm rounding. So we had a net negative, but it's a positive because we're shrinking the size of government and we are bringing back manufacturing. Listen to Mike Stager.
A nation builds wealth by producing, mining, growing, manufacturing, building, and selling. That wealth then circulates back into the nation. Wages, factories, hospitals, roads, research and development. That's what real development looks like.
We are what we build. Trump is bringing back manufacturing everything that is critical: medicine, food, energy, natural resources, weapons, so that we control it. And if we don't control it exactly, we make sure that if we need it from someone else, it's in our hemisphere, because geography is a big deal, and it is a close ally. And we make sure we get it here eventually, meaning we can do it ourselves eventually. We are what we produce. Commerce over conflict. What Trump is also doing, which I don't think he gets into quite in this piece, but he's creating sovereign nations around the world. None of this UN stuff. He wants trading partners that are looking out for their own best interest. That's what we need.
That's every industrial nation that has ever existed. But globalism runs a second track alongside, parallel to that one. Call it the global casino. Dollars that would have gone into a nation's own development instead get siphoned off, legally, quietly, through paperwork, and rerouted into a parallel economy that produces nothing. It just hides and then multiplies. And the casino doesn't care whose money walks in the door. Corporate profits routed to a tax haven, a dictator's cut of his own country's oil, a cartel's cash, a terror network's war chest. To the casino, it's all just chips. Nobody built this by accident. The casino is a business model, and it's run by the City of London.
Bam.
That's the house. After their actual empire fell, the men who ran that empire needed a new business model. The City of London became the quote-unquote governor of the imperial engine, because when the colonies stopped sending home cotton and tea, the city started building something else, a web of nominally independent islands: Cayman, Jersey, Bermuda, the British Virgin Islands, the Isle of Man, all of which laundered much of the world's money the moment it landed. These locations were legally foreign, but financially all within the pound sterling, all wired straight back to that 1 square mile, the City of London. Today, by some estimates, half of the entire world's offshore wealth sits inside a British-linked jurisdiction, and half of world trade flows through a kind of secrecy jurisdiction of some kind. One tiny firm, for example, in Panama, had over 100,000 clients registered through the British Virgin Islands before it finally got caught. And here's the thing. The economists who first mapped this were trying to figure out why resource-rich countries in Africa and Latin America stayed so poor. And they found the same unexplained river of money every time flowing north, out of the ground and out of the country, into exactly this offshore system. It wasn't a side effect, it was the business model. In essence, the elites who gained the profits weren't even spending that money in the society. There wasn't even a trickle-down effect. The machine for keeping poor nations poor and the middlemen rich. And it has nothing to do with communism or capitalism. It's ultimately much older than both. And guess which leaders get international backing at the Davos summits? Which leaders get the stamp of approval? Which regimes are backed into power, whether the mullahs in 1979 or Chavez in 98, or many others with less renown?
We're going to stop it there because I want to get something else. But you see, He and I'm dying to have this conversation with them. All those people he just mentioned are all leftists. So while it's not technically, from his point of view, about communism or capitalism, leftism is the tool that they use to get the control of these countries, to be able to extract the wealth and keep everybody fighting. That's why this show is anti-leftist. Okay? So much of what he said, I highly recommend you go watch that. It's in my thread, The Ord American. And essentially what he is saying there is that the British never thought they lost the revolution. They just reimagined what it could look like. And globalists and neocons have been on the side of the City of London forever, keeping us in wars, extracting money through the Defense Department, through the Straits of Hormuz, through oil and gas. Remember, we've been over it before. There's an estimate of about $15 per barrel of oil for every barrel of oil sold in the world since 1979, when the Ayatollah took over, called the Iran terrorism tax. A tax that was put on it because of the potential that that regime was going to disrupt things. So insurance, other transactional costs went up. Okay? Commerce over conflict. We are what we build. Young people. Leftism is a lie. Democrats are lying to you. Trump is not a fascist. Trump is the way out. He is building America back up from the bottom. If you really do care about the wealth gap or the income gap, Trump is your way out. If you've ever heard this said, well, if we get rid of the illegals, the Americans don't want to do that job. If you've said that yourself or you've heard that from somebody who's anti-American. Why? It's the same thing people said in the South around slavery. Who's going to do it if the slaves don't do it? The North had to figure out how to compete with free labor, and they did it. And the North had a way more established, diversified, and stable economy than the South. If you're saying who will do it, you're right. An American won't do that job for the wages that you pay an illegal alien. He will do it for the appropriate wage. That illegal alien is distorting the market. And just because it hasn't distorted your market and you can get away with voting for these people doesn't mean that it's okay. All right, one last thing just has to do with more lies. This is a sad one. Where is it? Let me get to it. No, that's not it. There it is. So RFK Jr., we talked a lot about this last week. He's right now, what he's doing is he's conducting the most brilliant and widespread discovery of any lawsuit ever, only there's no lawsuit. He's been fighting these cases against these pharma companies for decades. He knows where the documents are. He's just never been able to get them, or was never able to get them into the record. Now he's in the federal government because one of the tricks that these pharma companies have used over the course of time is they essentially give the documents to the government, and then the government deep sixes them, either through classifications of confidentiality, or just sticks them away in giant warehouses so that the company can say, well, we don't have them. Okay? There's a vaccine called Gardasil. I know this because I have a daughter. And when you have a daughter, certainly growing up in LA, as she was for the first, whatever that was, 12 years of her life, 10 years of her life, something like that, 12, I think. Everybody talks about Gardasil. You got to get your daughter Gardasil. You got to get it early. It prevents HPV, and she'll eventually be sexually active. And they give it to girls as young as like 10 years old. And there's a fervor that people were going at it, like, get it. And myself and my wife, we said no. Thank goodness. There's now, unfortunately, here's the headline. Let me get that in there. Mothers of 2 girls who died after Gardasil HPV vaccine sue Merck. These 2 girls, unfortunately, took the Gardasil vaccine and died. The moms are suing Merck. This is a good thing. Not that they girls died. That's a terrible thing. It is a good thing that they're suing Merck. Why? It is the best tool ordinary Americans have to change that particular part of the system. Get a jury to put a heavy financial penalty on these companies. If you're sitting on that jury, you should consider an absolutely massive award that's going to hurt those companies, because those companies knew what they were doing. We didn't today. You know what? I might do it, because I said on my X that I was gonna put this on there, and now I can't even find it. But this is not unlike when, yeah, I am going to do this. So the great Maze Moore, he does videos, as you know. I don't know him, never met him. He does unbelievable, what I would call before and after videos. And basically what he's doing is he's showing, here's what Democrats said before and here's what they said afterwards. He's got a great one of Fauci saying something like 2 weeks after he got emails and text messages from people saying, we see problems with pregnant women and the COVID vaccine. He's on TV saying, don't worry about it, take it, it's safe. That is evil. Now, watch this. This is a video of a guy, this is a CNN reporter, who's gone down to Florida because this school, Miami private school, makes bogus claims about vaccines while ordering students who get a shot to stay home for 30 days. Watch this.
Well, I think it's a family decision, and we should respect, like everybody's privacy.
It is a family decision, but it makes everyone safer because so many people have gotten the vaccinations. Tens of thousands of people are not dying.
There's a lot of people who get the vaccine and it's dying right now.
Nah, that's not true.
So, no, it is true.
No, it's not true.
Fox News says the truth.
Fox News says it's true, but that's definitely not true. It's false. That's the problem.
Fox News is the one that you can get, like.
Now, let me just tell you, sir, the greatest scientists in the world know that this vaccine is saving lives. So my question for you is...
He's not the best scientist in the world.
Yeah, well,
that's just one opinion,
Yeah, you're hearing bad information, sir. But with all due respect, I wish you good health.
This father, he is being charitable here. Okay, he is being charitable. This idiot reporter is trying to be the judge, jury, and executioner, and the decider of all things vaccine related. Telling this guy, oh, you got to get the vaccine. The only question I have for that reporter is, were you just stupid and duped like a fool, or were you in on it? What were you getting? Did you get a promotion? Were you told to go along with it? Were you told if you don't, you won't get the promotion? What did you get? Or are you just that stupid? There's an internal civil war, and these things are now pulling things apart because people who are voting Democrat are saying, wait a second, people did die from the vaccine. Oh, look, Fauci was lying. The Democrats told me he was telling the truth and I should listen to him. This is the internal thing. And then the left comes along, the DSA, and they're going even further. No Senate, no Supreme Court, no presidency. Make Congress a super body that controls everything. And then the establishment Democrats are saying that's not for us because they see the data. They know that the leftists can't win general elections, even if they can win primaries. And by the way, go back to the autopsy. Why can the left win the primaries? Because the establishment is getting generationally wealthy and they don't have a care or concern to focus on what's really happening. They're like, whatever, I got my power, I'm making my check, I got my nonprofit, whatever, I don't care. Yeah, let them win. Okay, I'll stay in power. All right. This is The Ordinary American. I'm your host, Paul Sarkis. Please pass it on. We're fighting to make America great again. As the great father Mike Schmidt says, I'm praying for you. Please pray for me. I like to say I'm rooting for you. Please root for me. We'll see you tomorrow, 2 p.m.